Yeah, it's nice if the Wall Street Journal covers it or not, but at the end of the day, you are the vehicle that communicates our message, our concerns, our anxieties, our celebrations to our constituencies. And we very frequently take you for granted, as does the state of Israel. And so to be part of this unique first is very special, and I hope that with your enthusiasm and our enthusiasm, this is the beginning of an event that will only grow and strengthen in terms of the vehicle of communication. Okay, now to the subject at hand. Measuring anti-Semitism is not an exact science. It's a configuration of all kinds of things. We saw only recently when the EU polled Jews of Europe to ask how they see it, how they feel about it. We in the ADL a year ago did a poll of Israeli teenagers. You know, people said, anti-Semitism in Israel, how did they're immune from it? And yet we found, to our surprise, shock, or chagrin, that 70% of Israeli teenagers felt anti-Semitism while in Israel through the vehicle of the internet. They felt assaulted, insulted, threatened, etc., etc. So we've been doing polling as one element of the total picture of anti-Semitism for many years. We have never done this on this grander scale of 102 countries because it's very expensive, and we were able to fund it because of a donor who came to us and said, look, I believe there's anti-Semitism in the world. I believe it's rising. All I have is anecdotal evidence. Is there a way to establish an index to begin to measure it? So this is the beginning of establishing an index. And again, I say to you, it's not a perfect instrument. It needs to be shaped, it needs to be focused, it needs to be managed in the future. But it does give us a serious view of what is and what isn't. And the first, what is that 1 out of 4 adults in the world are infected with the disease of anti-Semitism. That's I wouldn't say shocking, but it certainly is a very, very troubling statistic. We need not to forget the good news. 74% are not. And then, again, I'm not going to go through it. You can download it. You'll see the differences in the countries. Region makes a difference. We've learned something new. That region today is more important in anti-Semitism than any other factor. And so the Middle East and North Africa are the highest level of anti-Semitism in the world. There are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of findings. We may talk about them in the interim. You can download it, and I promise you, if you begin downloading, there is data there that needs a great deal of study. And finally, to say to you, we don't have answers. I mean, I cannot tell you. That's more for you to delve in. Why is Greece the highest index of anti-Semitism in Europe? Why is South Korea so high? Why is Laos? Why are countries with Jews and without? So there are a lot of questions to be answered. The poll does not pretend to have the answers. The poll focuses on issues that we need to continue to probe.
Okay, but I mean, you look at those figures. I mean, you didn't go into the region by region, but you mentioned Middle East and North Africa. The overall figure for Middle East and North Africa was 74%. The figure for anti-Semitism among the Palestinians was, I think, 93%. The best in this area, interestingly enough, by the way, was Iran at, what, 56%, right? First of all, the criteria that you used, I wonder, if we all asked ourselves in this room, do you think that citizens of your country have a certain dual loyalty because of an identification with Israel? Do you think Jews have too much influence in business? Do you think Jews think that they're better than anybody else? I'm not sure how well we would do, to be honest, on the anti-Semitism scale. So how confident are you that the criteria that you used, there were 11 questions, right? And if you said yes to 6 of them, you're an anti-Semite. I think I'd probably say yes to at least 6 of them.
Okay, that's a very interesting, entertaining question, and we've been asked, so why don't you test the Jews? Why don't you test? So what? For what purpose? For entertainment? What is it that it's going to tell us and teach us? Okay.
No, but I'm asking you a really serious question, which is the basis of your poll and the concern that it raises. Are we sure that that's a fair basis? That if you believe that the Jews, I looked at the whole financial crisis that has played out in recent years, and every time the head of the bank turned out to be Jewish, I cringed, and I certainly wished that there were fewer Jews at the heart of the American financial system. Does that make me an anti-Semite? I'm questioning the basis.
Well, okay. I think the basis, we've been using that for the last 40 years. Again, it's not an exact science, but let me give you an anecdote. I remember when Marlon Brando in his farewell interview was asked about the films that he makes and the films that he doesn't make. It basically came down with saying, the films that I want to make, I can't make because the Jews control Hollywood. And we were then asked, and we said, to say that the Jews control Hollywood is anti-Semitic. And a lot of Jews came to us and said, what are you talking about? Look at all the Jews in Hollywood. Look at all the directors, look at all the producers, look at all that. And the answer to that is, there is, just to say the Jews are there. Jews are there in Hollywood, not as Jews. They are producers, directors, financiers, not as Jews. What Marlon Brando was talking about, and what the answer to these questions are talking about, is in Hollywood, the Jews get together on Sunday morning at Katz's Deli and decide what it is they're going to project about Jews in a certain manner. The answer to these questions about Jews is not that the Jews are there, but their view that the Jews control as Jews, that they're there in order to control either for power or for power to make money. That's a malignant view of a certain fact. It's their coloring. And in history, we paid a price for it. I remember I sat with the foreign minister of Spain who said to me, well, when we say Jews are successful, we mean it as a compliment. I said, yeah, that's the compliment that paved the way to Auschwitz. So, sure, many Jews feel, we feel very proud. But the consequences out there are not beneficial, they are malignant.
Okay, I think this is really interesting, and I would like to understand more about the line that you're drawing. So in the Middle East, for example, where 3/4 of people are deemed to have an anti-Semitic stance, you're saying that basically they hold to a view that it's basically the Elders of Zion, right? That the Jewish leadership gets together somehow and plans how to advance its interests, sometimes at the expense of the rest of the world. Is that what this adds up to?
The number one stereotype across the world, 41%, was that Jews are not loyal. I'm going to say not loyal, more loyal to Israel. But the issue of loyalty means that they are more loyal to their own interests, which is a version of the protocols of the learned elder. Jews only care about themselves, about their own interests. Again, if you even look at Nazism, it did not begin with racial supremacy. It did not begin with the master race. Hitler blamed the defeat of Germany on the Jews, that the Jews controlled for their own interest. Later became Aryan supremacy, later became racism in a classical sense. But it was this basic concept of Jews only care about themselves, only care about power, at the cost of everybody else. And that thing still plays throughout the world, that Jews are not loyal. Norwegians, Jews, we have it in the United States. The United States, which is probably better than any other country in terms of modern day anti-Semitism, and we're not immune. 26%, 1 out of 4 Americans to this day believe that American Jews are more loyal to Israel than the United States. That's classic anti-Semitism.
Okay, forgive me on that last point, but there's some truth in the assertion that a proportion of American Jews, if you put them on the spot and they said, where does your heart lie most? A lot of them would say Israel. So again, explain.
No, but David, that's not true. That's not true. During the last election, the issue Israel played heavily in the election campaign. Some Jews pushed it, etc. And polls were taken by Pew and by Reuters. And the result was something that surprised many Jews. 4 to 5% of American Jews put Israel as a number one issue. Now, the question is, Israel first Jews. 4 to 5%. So where is this image by 1 out of 4 Americans, or almost 40% of the world? By the way, part of the world also believes that Jews control America, okay, and therefore it's foreign policy. That's a perversion. Listen, Italians feel good about their culture, their history. On Italian Day, they parade. There are more Italian restaurants and culture and music, and nobody says to them. So it is a classic stereotype which infects today the world. Now, I want to go back to, people have said to us, you know, where do you cut this line to make somebody anti-Semite? You know, if you have people who believe in only 3 of the stereotypes, we have not called them an anti-Semite, 4, 5, 6. We've taken a low level. If it acts like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. If you are a person who will say, Jews do this in all the classical terms, that's what they are, infected by anti-Semitism. The next question is, what will they do? Will they act? What will trigger them? That's another issue we have to consider. But unfortunately, we took a conservative measure of 6 out of 11. And you know, it's very nice, entertaining, look for yourself what you believe, then put yourself in the shoes of the non-Jew and see where that fits.
Help us on the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism thing. Where is the line at which legitimate criticism of Israel spills over into anti-Semitism, or is all criticism? And where does BDS come in? And where does the Presbyterian vote to divest from Israel? And where does American support for a Hamas-backed Palestinian? Draw us some lines here.
All in what, 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Take your time.
I want to separate what we found in the survey in terms. You know, I don't know if it's necessary to say it, but I guess we're saying. The most frequently asked questions I get is, you know, can we criticize Israel not be called an anti-Semite? And I don't think we have to rehearse it here. Yeah, of course you can. There's more criticism of Israel and Israel's policy in the state of Israel per square kilometer, per square Jew than anywhere else in the world. So it's not an issue of criticism. So yeah, absolutely you can criticize and not be. Then there's a question of anti-Zionist. Can you be anti-Zionist and not be an anti-Semite? A lot tougher. I would say a lot tougher. Because you can be an anti-Zionist and not be an anti-Semite if you're one of those ducks out there who doesn't like nationalism, who wants a universal world, who feels that nationalism is racist and discriminatory. But I better find you being anti-Palestinian nationalism, French nationalism, German nationalism. But if the only nationalism that you don't like and you find racist and you find difficult to deal with is Jewish nationalism, then you're an anti-Semite. So let's put that aside. Now, on the issue of I'll go back to the poll, what did we find? Interestingly enough, we could not establish the causality and the link. I think most of us believe that there's a very close relationship between attitudes against Israel and anti-Semitism, or anti-Semitism and attitudes to Israel. We could not establish that causality in either direction in the poll. For example, you have a group of countries, Scandinavia, the UK, very low on the issue of anti-Semitism, and yet pretty high on the level of anti-Israel. You have a group of countries, former Soviet Union, very high on the level of pro-Israel, support of Israel, and also very high on the level of anti-Semitism. So regardless how we feel in here or in here, we could not establish it in the polling to say that there is a causality relationship of one to the other.
Okay, now on to some of the BDS. Tell me about BDS.
Well, from my
boycott, divestment, and sanctions for anyone who's not familiar with the terminology.
You know, I set for myself my own test. You can set yourself your own test. BDS is a very interesting, maybe even positive element to try to evoke and bring about social change in the world. So if youngsters or a church or any organized group wants to affect a change in behavior of any government on whatever issue they think important, and they want to use boycott, sanctions, be my guest. But I will then look to see who it is that you are targeting with this social action, advocacy, punishment venture. And if this is where you're going, I can give you a list of 20 countries. And if you can take China, you can name them, Cuba, Algeria, be my guest, Saudi Arabia, a lot of countries that need change in their social behavior, in human rights, etc., etc. So if you would give me a list of 10 countries that you are engaging in BDS and you include Israel, I will argue that Israel doesn't belong, it has this, but at the end of the day, if this is what you're doing and Israel is part of it, okay. But if the only country that you use the system of boycott and punishment because of your perceived violation of human rights is the Jewish state, that's anti-Semitism. We recently had in the US one of these organizations that called for a boycott in the social studies field. And the president was asked this question, and his answer was, well, you got to start somewhere. Well, if you start with the Jewish state, if you start with Israel, that's anti-Semitism. Now, you asked about the
president. So Presbyterians who are divesting from 3 companies who they would say, this is not anti-Israel, this is only because of their activities in the territory.
I would apply the same thing. Where else are they focusing on American companies engaged in? Is Israel the only place that Caterpillar has equipment? So there again is a selection. By the way, there was a debate on the Presbyterian Convention as to whether or not to remove praying for the Jews. Praying for the Jews because they are violating. To me it's borderline anti-Semitism. And this is not that they came onto it by accident. There have been conversations and discussions, and yet they still come down to the point that the only country that deserves singling out is the Jewish state. And to me, if it's not direct anti-Semitism,